Oh, hello everybody. It's time for part two of our Delaware history program. Today we're going to focus on the agricultural and industrial roots of Delaware. We'll run through the 1800s right up to the beginning of the 20th century. As I had mentioned in the last show, very distinct history and flavor between northern Delaware and southern Delaware. In northern Delaware, you have certain industries that flourish. A lot of those reasons are geographic. And in the south, you have agriculture as their prime activity for most of Delaware history. And arguably still today, most of the farms in Delaware are going to be in Kent and Sussex County, the middle and lower counties of Delaware. Newcastle County up north, much different history. And a much different flavor still today. Let me start with the South. So, as I had mentioned, agriculture, the big player in the southern Delaware economy, always was, still is a big part of it today. The early colonial period, you have crops like wheat, corn, peas, beans. These were all of the crops that were around back then. Some of those were even crops that the Native Americans, again, the Lenni Lenape and the Nanticoke down south, some of these crops were being grown by them as well. I mentioned the Lenni Lenape in the last show. There are some words that we still use in Delaware that are from their tongue. For instance, the town of Hockessin, Algonquin word, Lenni Lenape word. There's a road that runs in northern Newcastle County called Kayamensi Road. And Kayamensi, meaning sweet water, is also one of their words. An early name for the Brandywine Creek was Wawasset Creek. And there's a part of Wilmington called Wawasset Park as well. So, still quite a few words that we inherited and we still use. Alapocus, the Alapocus Woods area, Alapocus, Algonquin word. So the Native Americans grew certain crops and the early colonial visitors to Delaware maintained some of those. So in the South you have a long history of agriculture. Tobacco, also grown in southern Delaware, that was a cash crop, brought to Philadelphia for export all around. Really, I'm going to start with 1830s. You have a guy named Isaac Reeves, and he's the guy that brought peaches to southern Delaware. And for a very, very long time, Delaware peaches were well known to be some of the best peaches around. At one point, there were well over 4 million peach trees in southern Delaware. And so peaches was a big crop. In the 1840s, a guy named Major Philip Raybould was known as the Peach King. He has established a small port in Delaware City, which is where he would ship his peaches out. In fact, the peach basket, you still see them in the orchards. They start up here nice and wide, and they kind of come down to a smaller base. That is said to have been invented in Delaware, so that these peach bushels, these peach baskets, could fit into railroad cars and not tip over on their way to the different ports. Kind of like a cup holder is today, a little smaller, and you put the cup in, holds it so it doesn't fall around. They say that was invented in Delaware. So peaches was a huge deal, as was the canning of fruits and vegetables. In 1855, near Dover, there were several canning factories where the local produce and fruits would be brought in by rail and canned and then shipped back out. When the railroad came to Delaware in 1830s, that really opened up the southern part of the state and brought a lot of money in agriculturally to move around. It was, of course, you don't hear too much about peaches anymore, and that's because in the late 1800s, a blight a disease called the yellows wiped out most of the Delaware peach crop, never able to rebound. The yellows killed off most of the peach trees, and the peach industry in Delaware fell apart and was never able to come back. Before a time, Delaware was well known for its peaches. I'm sure people in Georgia don't want to hear that, but they say the Delaware peaches were exceptional. It's a hot day here. I like to have a nice juicy peach, so maybe I'll score one when we're done. But Delaware peaches, very famous. Also, holly, remember the American holly is our state tree. Holly and laurel branches were harvested in southern Delaware in the late 1800s and used in early Christmas decorations. Of course, today we still hang wreaths all around. Those things were big business in Delaware. In fact, the town of Laurel is said to have gotten the name in part due to those early industries of holly and laurel branches being woven together and shipped out for the holidays. So those are some of the early crops that flourished and kind of put southern Delaware on the map. Northern Delaware has a whole different story. And again, geography plays into it. There are several creeks that made industry and business in northern Delaware successful. Where Wilmington sits, this town of Wilmington, the city of Wilmington, is on the confluence of the Brandywine Creek, the Christina Creek, people say river for both of those as well, and where they, of course, join and then empty into the Delaware River. And those creeks and other creeks called the White Clay Creek and the Red Clay Creek, early industry flourished. A guy named Oliver Evans from Newport, Delaware. Oliver Evans, and this goes back to 1755, he was born. He was an early inventor, and he invented a new way for milling, a new way to take grains, specifically in the beginning, and mill them down. And that new invention, water power, different gears, that was one of the first patents that the United States ever signed. His patent was in 1790. Both George Washington and Thomas Jefferson signed that patent that Oliver Evans of Newport, Delaware, came with. And he put one of his first mills along the Red Clay Creek, a shallow but fast-running creek. And the power of that water helped turn the water wheels and helped, mill the grains. Later, others would use the Brandywine Creek for the same purpose. Early milling on the Brandywine Creek included flour mills, and there was one specific which was known as Brandywine Superfine. There is still a road along the Brandywine in Wilmington called Superfine Lane, where that early mill was. And again, the Brandywine is a shallow but fast-moving creek, and that water power was used to make very, very fine flour, which was known all over the East Coast for being quality flour used for baking in the early 1800s. So the creeks were a major part of all that. Of course, in 1802, E.I. DuPont would come from France, and his early gunpowder facilities were along the Brandywine Creek for the same reasons. The speed of the water. This is all pre-electricity, of course. So water power was essential for these early industries. And E.I. DuPont, and later his ancestors, built the DuPont Company, which today is much different than as it started, a gunpowder making company. And his mills where they would make the gunpowder still exist down on the Brandywine. It is a museum now. So Hagley Museum highlights the early history of E.I. DuPont, the DuPont Company, and gunpowder in America. So that was a major part of the story. Also, many Quaker families, the Tatnalls, the Canbys, the Shipleys, the Lays, the Mortons, the Pools, early names that many Delawareans are familiar with. Roads are named after them, parks are named after them. They also built their different mills along the Brandywine River. Shipbuilding becomes very important along the Christina River, and I'll talk more about that in my next episode, which I'll highlight the 20th century economic influence of Delaware. I also want to do a small show on the Civil War and Delaware's role in the Civil War. So today, quickie on North and South, the differences betwixt them. The C&D Canal, the Chesapeake and Delaware Canal, which literally cuts Delaware right across. Some people called it the ditch. The C&D Canal is not quite the separating point because Newcastle County goes a little bit beyond the canal. But certainly that canal does cut Delaware between north and south. And those differences, both ideological and real, still exist today. So a little bit on some of the early industries of Delaware. The south, agricultural. The north, more industrial. And we'll talk more about that in the next show. And I got a Civil War show coming. And I hope everybody's having a great day. We're in the middle of a little early July heat wave. I know most of America is. So stay cool. Take it easy. And I'll see everybody later. Take it easy. Bye-bye, everybody. And now we shut her off. We got mail. And now we shut her off.